and welcome to Sharing the Manual podcast, brought to you by You Insure, where we journey with you to finish well financially. This journey takes you to an intersection of life and money coaching. As we all know, how you live out your life in all areas has lasting effects on your money. Now, it has been said that emotionally connected men and women have better finances. My name is Amy Yu, and if you've seen my last name, you know why I've shortened it. And I will be your host. I am so glad that you've joined us on what is sure to be a memorable adventure. One where no topic is off limits. We understand that all areas of our lives are intertwined. We will talk money, emotions, even emotions around your money. Raising kids, which is sure to be a hoot, as they say the darndest things. Dating, relationships, marriage, grief in so many forms, whether it's a death, a divorce, an illness, or just your life not turning out how you thought it would. Because that, my friends, is very real, and I know that firsthand. We will tackle life's epic fails, celebrate the wins, overcome the obstacles, address the mountains and valleys in each other's lives. No rock will go unturned. This podcast is one of real, honest, genuine, humorous conversations where we share stories that are sure to inspire you, encourage, equip, and empower you to live out your best life. Our goal is to build connections, community of belonging, as you, my dear, are not the only one. We are journeying and navigating this life together, and I hope that you're ready to dive right in.
Hello, everyone, and thank you for being with us today. I'm super excited. Wow, oh my goodness, do we have an amazing human here on the show today. Carly, your heart for women's mental health is truly inspirational. Today's topic is going to be inner healing, and I brought you to the show because we all have a healing journey that we are navigating. And I love what you've said, and you've said it before, it's time to quit the trial and error approach to improving your mental health. You are an ambitious woman empowering others to take radical responsibility for their mental health, to step into their personal power and create a life by their own incredible design. Now, your bio, oh my goodness, like I was amazed by it, but through Eunoia Collective and Eunoia Medical, you and your team provide education, virtual therapy to help over 400 women build a solid foundation of mental health from which to grow. But you didn't even stop there. You have cultivated a brave her community where women are transformed and tap into their power to overcome obstacles and bring world-changing dreams into reality. Now, don't worry, everyone. We will let you know where you can get in touch with her and be part of her community. She is also a revolutionary mental health movement for women. You are a best-selling author, a podcaster, online publisher, health content creator, and top that all off, being a remarkable mom to a set of feisty twin girls. I just know that today's show is going to knock your socks off, and I'm excited to dive right in. Now, you had shared something else prior when we were in a discussion, and you said your mess becomes your message. And, you know, my tagline is sharing the manual, and we all have a story to share. And so I really want you, Carly, just to start with that because it's powerful.
Thanks. Yeah. And thank you for that beautiful introduction. I'm really lucky and happy to be here. I feel really grateful to be on Sharing the Manual. And Amy, really, my whole message around mental health comes really from my own journey. So I talk about this in my book as well, but I believe that I've basically had anxiety my entire life. I just think I didn't realize it. And throughout various parts and stages of my life, it morphed into different types of anxiety, right? As a child, I had a lot of social anxiety and separation anxiety. And then as I moved into adolescence and my high school years, it was like, again, social anxiety, but then morphed into kind of like achievement oriented perfectionism type of anxiety. And those things kind of benefited me well in that I was really academically successful and, you know, ended up with a full ride scholarship to my undergrad and all these sorts of things. And that sort of anxiety was really like a really high performing, a high functioning type of anxiety that kept me very diligent with studies and things, and very organized. And then I was accepted to medical school in Calgary, and my anxiety again morphed into a lot of performance anxiety, making sure that I was going to be the best medical student and then the best physician I could be. But really, I know this all now in retrospect because my knowledge of my anxiety disorder really didn't grab me until about 3 months after the birth of my twins. I say 3 months because I think that's when I woke up to it, but it was definitely worse than it had ever been. And I say I was kind of overtaken by a really severe postpartum mood disorder. So my girls were born, and shortly thereafter, I really lost sight of who I was. I remember feeling for so long that maybe this was just what motherhood was supposed to be like. I had really explosive, uncontrollable rage. My baby monitor was broken in half because I'd thrown it at the wall so many times. I had really terrible, intrusive and scary thoughts. And any new moms or new parents can probably, understand what I'm talking about when you hear about those scary thoughts. They're like, where does this come from? What am I thinking? At one point, I had such severe anxiety. I was super rigid around my girls' sleeping schedule and trying to make sure they were on a schedule, thinking that if I just got it a certain way, that everything would work perfectly, right? And I've learned so much about my experience now. Looking back, I've learned a lot about what was happening. So thankfully, I did eventually kind of recognize what was going on. And I share that it took probably close to 9 months after my girls were born before I recognized that I was not just in normal motherhood. I was very much in the throes of a severe postpartum mood disorder. And I just want to share that that's from the perspective of a physician who's worked with women and their brains before. So I'm a family doctor. I did a lot of prenatal and postpartum care. I delivered babies. And I was always really fascinated about the brain and mental health. So I always have had an interest, and I knew a lot about mental illness and postpartum mental health. And I still missed all the signs in myself for a really long time. I was able to rationalize it and kind of, I used to tell myself if, I could fix myself if I just did enough yoga and I just did enough meditation and I just ran enough and I just did all these things. And so I share that specifically because I know a lot of people blame themselves when they don't recognize what's going on. So don't worry, you're not alone in that. So thankfully, I was able to get the support I needed. It looked like a therapist. It looked like medication. It looked like setting some boundaries. And really, it looked like, when I look back on it, really understanding what my true values were and starting to step into those and own those in my own self, right? So we can get into that a little bit more. But so after I healed from what I went through, I really re-entered my career with a new passion and focus on supporting women. And I think that's where that quote is not my own, the mess becomes the message, but it really resonates because it's like what you experience, what you walk through. Often we want to turn around and help those behind us. And that was very much my experience. So shortly thereafter, I started taking additional kind of training and courses and certifications in various mental health avenues like coaching and dialectical behavioral therapy and different psychotherapy methods, and started working with women in my family practice and on referral. And so fast forward, because my girls are now 5. So in November of 2021, with the pandemic raging and things changing in the province I was working in, I decided that I needed to spread my wings a bit. And I wanted to go travel more across our country and see, a variety of different places. But I wanted to take my patients with me. So I began Unoya Medical, which is a virtual women's mental health clinic, and it grew exceptionally fast. Over the first, 9 months of the clinic's inception, we grew by 1,000% of physicians. So we just onboarded our 14th physician in just under, now 16 months in business.
That's amazing.
And you mentioned 400 women. We're probably over that now because we just had a huge influx of physicians, and it's been really amazing. So we're probably helping somewhere around 500 women now ongoing with their mental health. And we do comprehensive mental health care. So that looks like psychotherapy, lifestyle, discussion of, boundaries and relationships, and then looking at things like your biology and, what sort of mental health and medical conditions and how those interact, and as well as medication therapy as needed. So that's kind of my story and what I've taken from it. But I really do believe that there's so much that we can do differently when we're helping women, to empower them to understand how their brains work, to empower them to know that what they know in their heart is true for them is actually what's right. And they just need to find the courage and be brave to actually go through and follow through with that.
It's that inner knowing, right? And but this is the crazy thing, Carly. Why is it taking, for me, I'm in my 40s, but why is it taking me 40 years to figure this out? I'm like, what the heck? That I'm doing this healing now. It's crazy.
Well, I think it comes down to the fact that we are so, I hesitate to use the word indoctrinated, but that's almost what it is, right? We're so conditioned from such a young age. And it sounds like, our upbringings are terrible. And in some cases they are, but, even our benign, beautiful, loving parents, are socially conditioned, and they pass that conditioning down to us about, how women are supposed to behave and what that relationship looks like, between partners, and what is the role of a woman in a family and in society. And I think that we kind of lose ourselves in all the different scripts, right, that we're told we're
Yeah.
supposed to play in. And that was certainly part of my story too. So my husband and I, we followed the rules in terms of like, we got married, we found a house, I got my career, we had kids, and, we're following the very cookie cutter kind of model that a lot of people do. And then we were living in this beautiful house that I really felt was my dream house. And I realized waking up one day that, yeah, it was a dream house, but the house was not my dream. Like having a house was not my dream. And it took a lot of inner healing and inner examination and asking myself about my true values to realize like, I didn't want a big house with a beautiful yard and all that. I really didn't. So, we ended up selling that, and we're nomadic now, and we move all over. We spent the winter in Mexico because that was really what was really valuable to me. Right. So I think it's just that we get so lost in the stories and the conditioning and the what we should be and how we should show up that it takes a long time to come to terms with the fact that that might not actually align with who we are.
So how do we help our listeners? How do we help them and empower them to change, to shake things up, to, take a step in a different direction and to be brave? You talk about it all the time, and you have this brave heart. How do we equip them to do that?
So I think there's a couple different stages to that, but the overarching theme is that I am a firm believer that all women deep inside have an inner knowing that knows if they're fully in alignment with their life. The trick is being brave enough to acknowledge it. Many women are afraid of what acknowledging that will mean, and what the changes will have to happen, and what will people think, and what will our families do, and all these different things. We're not confident to acknowledge what's happening. And so I know like many women who are like, deep down, maybe the relationship they're in is really actually not good for them, but they're like, it's fine, right? But deep down inside of us, we all have an inner knowing. We just have to actually be brave enough to recognize it. And this doesn't mean that there's something wrong in everyone's life. Like, you don't have to go on a wild goose chase. Like if you're feeling like deep down, no, like everything feels really amazing in my life and I'm living my exact purpose, wonderful, then you've done it, right? But if there's any part of you that's like, oh, like I know that this job, this isn't my passion, or, I really want to have kids, but my partner doesn't. And like, whatever it is that is your kind of your thing, like we have to honor that. We have to acknowledge that. And it does take a lot of courage. And I think when we start to do those things, there's amazing things that happen and terrifying things that happen. And I walk women through these journeys all the time. And it's often as soon as we start to step out of what we've been doing for so long, our brain is really smart and it comes up with all sorts of ways to keep us there because it wants us to stay safe. It wants us to do what we've been doing. And so that's where anxiety comes in. That's where social conditioning, you're like, what are people going to think? What if I disappoint people? All this. And that's all the conditioning that really holds us back as women. So, long story short, yeah, exactly. Right. It's like, there's so much that we are conditioned to do, right? Like, don't disappoint anyone, make sure everyone's happy. Like a big part of the things that I teach women are like, it is 100% okay for other people to be disappointed. Like it is actually not ever our job, right, to fix everyone's disappointment. But when we were growing up, many of us grew up in families that it wasn't okay for a family member to be disappointed. We had to fix it, right?
Well, and that's what's funny. It's because I grew up and I actually raised my kids for the most part with that same type of thing. And then it wasn't until I read Glennon Doyle's book, Untamed, that I was like, oh, and I actually had to sit down with my kids and read a line to them that says, it is your job to disappoint as many people as you can, as long as you don't disappoint yourself. And my kids are clever. So they look at me, they're like, even you, Mom. And I was like, oh, yeah, you know what? Even me, because, but you're right. We grew up this way. So we think that's the norm and we're conditioned that way. And all of a sudden it's so humbling to be able to be like, oh crap, I was wrong. I taught you wrong this whole time. Like 18 years of your life, I've taught you wrong.
Right. Well, and we really have to forgive ourselves. I think that as women, we're really, really good and quick to like judge and criticize ourselves and be like, oh my God, I've screwed up my kids. And I always say to women, like, we don't know what we don't know. Like, you have to give yourself grace. We've all were raised by parents that were doing the best they could. And it is our job, right, as of this next generation. And it's our children's job to learn from the previous generations. Like, that is evolution of the species. So, we can't know what we can't know. And when we do know, the onus on us then is to change and acknowledge, like you said, and be like, wow, I did do something I didn't realize. Oh my goodness. Now, it's okay for you to disappoint me. And it is really important because, I love that quote as well. Now that you mentioned that Untamed quote, that's actually in my book, if I'm not mistaken. I paraphrased her. I quoted her, I think, but it is so true because part of that conditioning I spoke of too, from an early age, women are taught to always doubt themselves. They're told like their emotions are not valid, or you're overreacting,
Yeah.
or you're sensitive, or you're dramatic, or whatever. Don't cry, don't get mad. So we get in the habit, whether we mean to or not, of really like negating ourselves. And I call it self-abandoning, right? So like you might have a feeling that something's important, but you're quick to write it off for yourself because you've been in the habit of just negating what you feel and think is right because other people have always told you that. So, when you start to get this kind of courage and bravery to say like, no, actually, like, I really believe this is what's for me, it feels terrifying because it may be one of the first times that you've chosen to actually like act on what you've been feeling inside. And the spoiler alert is that people don't typically like that, right? So the people in our lives, for kindness or not, right?
It's
They're
true.
used to us being, our families, God love them, right? Like they're
Yeah.
used to us being very helpful, very supportive, always like taking care of everyone. And these are all really good qualities to be, but never at our own expense. And I think that's where the tipping point is.
And I love that. So how do we balance that? Like, because it is a tipping point, but how do we do a better job of balancing that where we still stay true to ourselves and our knowing, but, still be kind and gentle? And I guess is that probably comes down to boundaries.
It comes down to boundaries. And I like to shift the conversation around like modeling rather than me versus you, right? Like, so a lot of us get in the habit of like, if I'm going to take care of myself and I'm going to prioritize myself, that means you come second, right? Always.
Right.
And sometimes that does mean that, but I think it can also be a healthy, beautiful place to model that like our needs are equal. It's not that yours are more important than mine or mine are more important than yours, but our needs are equal and we need to compromise and make room for all of it, right?
That is so good.
And I speak to modeling because our jobs, especially as women, like this is why I say that, empowering women and helping women heal is legacy work, is because what I help women with, they then help their families with, right? So when we empower women to take care of themselves, to advocate for themselves, to speak up for themselves, to claim their own dreams, to do all these brave things, they raise brave children and they have brave spouses and they have brave sisters and they have brave family members, and it really spills out. So, it's a balance and not a balance. I think that, I've always like taking care of myself, advocating myself has always been a really big priority for me. And it's never been me versus my kids. It's always, I'm doing this for me and you because I'm better when I take care of myself. Right. So it's really just a mindset shift. Right. A lot of mental health stuff is how can we shift our minds to a different point of view? Right.
I do like that. Now, I know that you had said a few words earlier and really, you were so qualified to recognize it in other people, but yet recognizing it in yourself is such a hard thing to do. And we almost sometimes think we're immune to it, but we're really not. How do we recognize it within ourselves?
Mental illness you're referring to, like anxiety? Or what do you recognize?
Anxiety, perfectionism, striving, that we're conditioned, that we're not living authentically and trusting our inner knowing. How do we start to recognize that within ourselves and to be able to call that out?
Well, I think you have to examine how you're feeling, literally, like daily. Like, you know what I mean? You have to be like, am I just chronically irritated? Like, am I just a bitch to everyone? Sorry. Am I, can I sleep? Like, do I actually fill my days? Like, do I enjoy what I do during the day? Do I feel a lot of negative emotions a lot? Like, am I resentful towards my family? Like, like looking at things that you're like, ooh, I feel that. I don't really like that. I feel that. That's one place to start, is we have to do a self-evaluation, right? Because we can't
inventory.
know. We can't know if something's wrong if we don't look at it. And then when we look at it, we again have to be brave enough to actually acknowledge that maybe there's a problem. And that's a big stopping point for a lot of women. Like, so many women will kind of know there's something going on, but they're like, it's too much work for me to focus on it. I have to do all these other things for all these other people.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
So like we really have to prioritize, right? You have to be like, okay, how am I going to take care of all these beautiful human beings if I cannot take care of myself, right? So being brave enough to acknowledge it, then prioritizing to actually get support. So by no means, am I going to ever tell you, oh, you just diagnosed yourself. No, like if you have concerns or questions about your mental health, see someone, make sure it's someone you can talk to and you feel really listens to you. Another big piece of why I started Unoya, right? Is like find someone who will listen and understands mental health and can prioritize your mental health and has the time to, whether that's therapist or, physician therapist, like we have, whatever, but you have to get an assessment, right? Like you have to make sure you're trusting professionals and asking them. But really, I always come down to, even if you don't score highly on my scales, But if you tell me, you know what, I feel like this is a problem for me, what can I do about it? I'm always going to give you advice, right? I think
Yeah.
another kind of barrier for people is that they don't want to be diagnosed with things. Like they don't want to have a diagnosis, but truly,
well, then it's a label, then it's stigma, then it's absolutely.
Yeah. But truly, mental health is not whether you have a mental illness diagnosed or not. It's really a spectrum of like feeling really good and feeling fulfilled and being productive and being able to, do your daily life versus the complete opposite, which is feeling like crap all the time, being depressed, crying, irritable, like labile mood, all those sorts of things, not being able to function very well. So you don't have to have a diagnosed mental illness to be struggling with mental health symptoms. And I think that's a really important thing to keep in mind is that, sometimes we can have symptoms and it just falls into like an adjustment period, right? You go through a stressor, which we've all been going through for the last couple of years, right?
Yeah. Transitions,
So,
right?
big transitions, anything, right? So
that's okay. You gave me some really good things. You gave me the inventory, prioritizing, assessment, getting the help that you need, the support, whereas people are listening, it's safe, they give you time, they hear you, they understand you, they're seeing you. Now, this is a learning curve that I know my family and I have been on, is being able to say more than just I'm fine or I'm good, and really trying to articulate what our true emotion is. And I remember coming home with an emotional chart at one time and with my kids, and they're 18, 16, and 12, and they looked at me like I was a crazy lady. But how do we? It's really hard because we get caught up in just saying, yeah, we're fine and we're good. How do we be vulnerable and say, you know what? Yeah, today is not a good day. And how do we put a word to it? Because sometimes that's the hardest part.
Yeah, that's a few questions in there, but I'll do my best to answer them. So emotional awareness, emotional intelligence is the ability to understand what's happening in your own body, right? And to be able to identify the experience that is happening. Now, depending on your upbringing, depending on whether you've experienced any kind of trauma, whether in childhood or adulthood, one's ability to detect and understand and process and label their emotions can really vary. But if we're talking about, just say, people in a family who are, relatively healthy and don't have significant mental health concerns, I'm kind of generalizing, so take that with a grain of salt. But, a lot of it in families especially, and I'm a huge advocate for this and have always been doing this with my kids as much as I can. You said, how do we be more vulnerable? Well, we just be more vulnerable, right? We have to just trust our family members with the information. And we also have to do it in a way that I always ask, what is the goal of the disclosure, right? So
I like that. So it's not manipulating, it's helpful.
Well, exactly, right? It's like, if you're saying I need support, like I need to be heard, I just need to be hugged, I just need, I'm going to take care of my own emotions, but I really want to be vulnerable with you and for you to know that I'm actually not doing great, but I'm okay, but I just could use some extra support, or I'm going to need some help with the kids or whatever. Like always asking yourself, okay, why am I saying this? And not because I think everyone's manipulative, but it's like, we really have to be mindful if we want to create a healthy emotional culture. We cannot use emotions as weapons. We can't weaponize them and say, I'm feeling angry, and then turn it into like, you have to fix it, because that's a messy emotional boundary, right? But so it's being cautious. I actually have a podcast episode about this, not to pitch my own podcast, but I have a podcast episode called How to Talk to Your Family About Your Mental Health. And I released it, I think last around Christmas time, because obviously there's lots of conversations often happening around the holidays and just navigating that. And I give a lot of really good tips in that podcast around, like consider your audience, consider if they can actually handle what you're telling them, those sorts of things, right? But with kids, it comes down to emotional awareness. It really does. It comes down to conversations, talking a lot, and being vulnerable and open with your own emotions. Like I say to my kids all the time, mommy's feeling really frustrated right now. It's nothing, you can't fix it. I'm going to take care of it, but I just need a minute. Can I have a minute right now? Because I don't want to say something I regret. So I'm just really honest with my kids, and we normalize it, because too often we were raised saying I'm fine, right? Like you and I were raised with like, we don't talk about emotions, or don't be mad, and we put it under the carpet, and and that's again our role as this generation, is to change that conversation and have our children, like my kids are 5, they can tell me they're frustrated, they can tell me something's impressive, that they're impressed, like they know a large spectrum. And I've done that really intentionally. My husband and I are really open about that. So you can start that at any time, but I think it's just being intentional about it and being open with it.
And I love that. Thank you for saying that we can start this at any time, because I just started it when my kids are 18, 16, and 12.
You're never doing your child you're never doing your child a harm by teaching them more emotional regulation skills. And it really is like, so foundational. That's, a big part of what we focus on. We unschool our kids / homeschool them. And actually emotional regulation is like the main name of the game for like the first couple of years is my intention, because really those are the skills that will set them up lifelong. Like, of course they'll learn to read and write, but they'll pick those up as we go. But if they can learn to read someone's face and understand and support and be compassionate and be kind, even though we're angry, like all those are skills that they need to learn. Right.
And I find too, in my generation, at least, we're doing a lot of unlearning and relearning. And that is, it's actually a beautiful thing, because oh my goodness, and like you said, when we know better, we can do better. Maya Angelou has a beautiful quote about that as well. And I just love it. You have so much wisdom and so much knowledge and so many nuggets that people can pull so much away from. I really want to leave room for you to share how people can get connected with you. What platforms are you on? Where can they find your podcast? And I will put all these links in the show notes as well, so people do have access to them.
Yeah. So a lot of my information is just going to be on carlycrewe.com. I'm on Facebook and Instagram. Admittedly, the last little while, life has been a bit hairy, so I haven't been too active on either social media platform, but I certainly am checking it, and you can absolutely reach out to me at any time on those. My podcast was Mind Over Motherhood podcast for 3 years. So if you're looking back and you're listening and it says Brave Her Podcast, but welcome back to Mind Over Motherhood. That is why we recently rebranded the podcast to the Brave Her Podcast. But yeah, there's like 3 or 4 seasons now, and I think especially the second season is really a lot of solo episodes where I dive in deep into a lot of mental health topics, especially around anxiety, perfectionism, communication. I think I have one on sleep, if I'm not mistaken. So there's a lot of goodness in there. And then I love interviewing women who are doing brave things, who are living brave lives, not in the huge sense necessarily, but they're just like, releasing the shackles of the conditioning. Like I talk about stepping into what they really feel is right for them and then living this amazing brave life. So you can find that. I think in my Instagram bio, of course, there's a link to all those things as well. And I do run a mental health membership program called the Unoya Collective. It is a year-long mental health program with courses that I've created around high yield mental health topics for women. And it's also a community. So I really believe that there's a lot of healing in women's communities because we can share, right? Podcast episodes are great for that too, as you hear another woman saying what she went through and you're like, oh my God, I'm not alone. I've experienced that. Exactly.
It's belonging. It's a culture thing for sure.
Yeah. So if you're looking for a community with women who are working on their mental health actively, it's a very positive, forward-focused community. That's a great one. And then if you're in Alberta and you are a woman over the age of 18 and you are looking for mental health support, Unoya Medical is funded by the Alberta Healthcare Plan. And we offer long appointments, an hour long with a physician therapist to really get the support you need. And you can find that at unoyamedical.ca.
And that is so wonderful that it's covered. Wow. Great. Like to be able to offer this is fantastic. Now, I did ask you for your favorite quote and you did say Brene Brown, but because I am like a nosy posy, I was totally checking out your website and loved it. And there was this nugget within the website. There's lots of nuggets within that website, let me tell you. But there was this one, and I really, really want to say it because, or maybe even Carly, you can say it because it's your heart for making a difference.
Well, and I see it, like, if I'm being honest, Amy, I see it so often because of the work I do with Unoya. And a big part of my mission for the longest time, it's funny how everything works out, but I remember thinking to myself, like, there's got to be a way that I can help more women. And I kept saying, but I can't do it myself. Like I only have so many hours. And I was for a while seeing women one-on-one, and it was like an hour-long appointment. And I'm like, this is good. Like, this is really good, but there's just more women. I need to reach more women. And then Unoya was born, and now, like, I'm able to help more women through other women. And I really believe, like, with every single woman that we support, we're supporting a family and a community and a network, right? You empower a woman to feel better, and now all of a sudden she's a calmer, happier parent. Her kids are more well regulated. Her spouse is now learning how to prioritize his mental health. I can't tell you how many of my patients say, do you know anybody who sees men like this? Because my husband really needs a therapist. And I'm like, oh, I love that, but no, I don't, unfortunately. Stay tuned for Unoya 2.0. But
right?
Like it really is the impacts. I really believe, and I always talk about the ripples. It's like they ripple out, right? And so never underestimate the power that you have to make someone feel better, because that could change a lot more lives than just theirs.
And I'm not sure if anybody else is wondering what Unoya actually means, but it means a well-mind, beautiful thinking.
Mm-hmm.
And I looked that up because I was like, okay, what is that? What's behind that? And I, you know, there's always a story. There always is. And so thank you so much, Carly, for being on the show. You and I could probably talk for hours about this inner healing journey and really unpacking our mental health. But I was so grateful that you came on the show today to share your nuggets of wisdom, and maybe we'll have to do this again.
Absolutely. Thank you for having me, Amy. It was a pleasure.
We hope that you guys found this insightful. We encourage you to subscribe to the channel so you don't miss out on the new releases that are coming soon. Follow us on social media. Our platforms are LinkedIn and Instagram. Head over to the website and let us know if you wish to share your story, either on the podcast or even in a blog. Our website is youinsureinc.ca, youinsureinc.ca. We too have newsletters as we give you our very own family recipes paired with tips and tricks so you can finish well too. Bye for now.